The next day, at 8 o'clock in the morning, Pierre and Nowitzki arrived at the Sokolniki woods and found Dolokhov, Denisov, and Rostov already there. Pierre had the look of a man occupied with some considerations of no concern to the present affair. His pinched face was yellow. He obviously had not slept the night. He looked around absent-mindedly and winced as if from the bright sun. Two considerations occupied him exclusively: the guilt of his wife, of which, after the sleepless night, not the least doubt remained, and the innocence of Dolokhov, who had no reason whatever to preserve the honor of a man who was a stranger to him. Maybe I would have done the same thing in his place, thought Pierre. Ivan certainly would have done the same thing. Why this duel, this murder? Either I'll kill him or he'll hit me in the head, in the elbow, in the knee. Leave here, run away, bury myself somewhere, came into his head. But precisely in the moments when such thoughts came to him, he, with that especially calm and absent-minded air which inspired respect in those who looked at him, would ask, "Will it be soon? Are we ready?" When everything was ready, the swords stuck in the snow to mark the barrier to which they had to walk, and the pistols loaded, Nowitzki came over to Pierre. "I would not be fulfilling my duty, Count," he said in a timid voice, "and would not justify the trust and honor you have shown me by choosing me as your second, if I did not think to tell you the whole truth at this very important moment. I think this affair has no sufficient grounds, and is not worth shedding blood over. You were wrong. You lost your temper." "Ah, yes, terribly stupid," said Pierre. "Then allow me to convey your regrets, and I'm certain that our adversaries will agree to accept your apology." And Nowitzki, like the other participants in the affair, and like everyone in similar affairs, not believing that things would go so far as an actual duel, "You know, Count, it's much more noble to acknowledge your mistake than to bring the matter to a point beyond repair. There is no offense on either side. Allow me to talk it over." "No, what is there to talk about?" said Pierre. "It makes no difference. So are we ready?" he added. "Only tell me, where am I to go, and where am I to shoot?" he said with an unnaturally meek smile. He took the pistol in his hands and began asking how to pull the trigger, because until then he had never handled a pistol, something he did not want to admit. "Ah, yes, like that, I know, I just forgot," he said. "No apologies, decidedly nothing," Dolokhov replied to Denisov, who for his part also made an attempt at reconciliation, and he also walked to the designated place. This place chosen for the duel was some 80 paces off the road, where the sleighs had been left, in a small clearing in the pine woods, covered with snow wet from the thaw that had set in over the last few days. The adversaries stood some 40 paces from each other at the edges of the clearing. Nowitzki and Denisov, measuring out the paces, left tracks imprinted in the deep, wet snow from the places where they were standing to their swords, marking the barrier, and stuck into the ground 10 paces apart. In 3 minutes, all was ready, and still they were slow to begin. Everyone was silent. "Well, begin," said Dolokhov. "Let's," said Pierre with the same smile. It was becoming frightening. It was obvious that the affair, having begun so lightly, could no longer be prevented by anything, that it was going on by itself, independently of men's will, and would be accomplished. Denisov first went to the barrier and announced, "Since the adversaries have refused reconciliation, kindly begin. Take your pistols and at the word 3, start walking towards each other. 1, 2, 3. Denisov cried out angrily and stepped aside. The two men began walking over the imprinted tracks, getting closer and closer, and recognizing each other in the fog. The adversaries had the right to fire at any time while coming to the barrier. Dolokhov walked slowly, without raising his pistol, his light, shining blue eyes peering into his adversary's face. On his mouth there was, as usual, the semblance of a smile. At the word 3, Pierre walked forward with quick steps, getting off the beaten track and stepping into the untouched snow. Pierre stretched his arm out and held the pistol as if he was afraid of killing himself with it. He carefully put his left hand behind him, because he would have liked to support his right hand with it, and he knew that was not allowed. Having gone some 6 paces and veered off the track into the snow, Pierre looked down at his feet, again gave a quick glance at Dólokhov, and pulling his finger as he had been taught, fired. Never expecting such a loud noise, Pierre gave a start, then smiled at his own impression and stood still. The smoke, especially thick because of the fog, at first prevented him from seeing anything, but the other shot he was expecting did not follow. All he could hear were Dolokhov's hurrying steps. Then his figure approached through the smoke. He was holding one hand to his left side. The other clutched his lowered pistol. His face was pale. Rostov ran over and said something to him. "No," Dolokhov said through his teeth. "No, it's not over." And taking several more dipping, hobbling steps to the sword, he fell on the snow beside it. His left hand was bloody. He wiped it on his coat and propped himself up with it. His face was pale, frowning, and trembled. "Kind," Dolokhov began, but could not get the word out. "Kindly," he finished with effort. Pierre, barely holding back his sobs, ran toward Dolokhov and was about to cross the space separating the barriers when Dolokhov cried, "The barrier!" And Pierre, realizing what it was about, stopped at his sword. Only 10 paces separated them. Dolokhov lowered his head to the snow, bit at it greedily, raised his head again, pulled himself together, tucked his knees under, and sat up, trying to find a steady point of balance. He filled his mouth with cold snow and sucked on it. His lips trembled, but went on smiling. His eyes glittered with the effort and the anger of a last summoning of strength. He raised his pistol and began to take aim. "Turn! Cover yourself with the pistols," said Nowitzki. "Cover yourself!" Even Denisov could not help crying to his adversary. Pierre, with a meek smile of pity and regret, his legs and arms spread helplessly, his broad chest exposed, stood before Dolokhov and looked at him sorrowfully. Denisov, Rostov, and Nowitzki closed their eyes. The shot and Dolokhov's angry cry came simultaneously. "Missed!" cried Dolokhov, and strengthless, he sprawled face down on the snow. Pierre clutched his head and, turning around, walked off towards the woods, treading on the untouched snow and mouthing incoherent words aloud. "Stupid, stupid, death, lies," he repeated, wincing. Nowitzki stopped him and took him home. Rostov and Denisov drove off with the wounded Dolokhov. Dolokhov, silent, his eyes closed, lay in the sleigh and did not answer a word to the questions they put to him. But as they entered Moscow, he suddenly came to, and raising his head with difficulty, took the hand of Rostov, who was sitting next to him. Rostov was struck by the totally altered, unexpectedly and rapturously tender expression on Dolokhov's face. "Well, so how do you feel?" asked Rostov. "Rotten. But that's not the point, my friend," said Dolokhov in a halting voice. "Where are we?" "We're in Moscow, I know, never mind. But I've killed her. Killed. She won't survive it. She won't survive." "Who?" asked Rostov. My mother, my angel, my adored angel, my mother." And Dolokhov wept, pressing Rostov's hand. When he had calmed down a little, he explained to Rostov that he lived with his mother, and that if his mother saw him dying, she would not survive it. He begged Rostov to go and prepare her. Rostov went ahead to carry out his errand, and to his great surprise, discovered that Dolokhov, this rowdy duelist, lived in Moscow with his old mother and a hunchback sister, and was a most affectionate son and brother. That was a selection from Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, read for you by Zachary Brown.